So normally I try and avoid Facebook at all costs. It's a terrible place that has nothing positive to offer, in my opinion. And of course, I'm being slightly exaggerated. But there's never been a time on Facebook, except for someone's birthday, that I've ever been glad that I've enjoyed and opened up that app on my phone. I don't know why it's still there. There's some friends who just will not quit using Facebook Messenger, and so I'm stuck with it. But anyways, so I open up a notification about a post that my cousin had made, and so you scroll through because, of course, that's the way Facebook is made for you to keep scrolling. And of course, I see the most ridiculous post that totally sent me on a rant, and so I'm going to deliver that rant to you about the frustrating things that just people post online. And there's so many different reasons that it's frustrating. And we'll get into it. But I read this article, right? This is on Facebook. It's a little small, so let me blow this up for you. It was posted by this guy, Sean Severt. I don't know who Sean is. It was a promoted post. And so as Facebook does, here we are. He said, a violinist played for 45 minutes in a New York subway. A handful of people stopped, a couple clapped, and the violinist raised about $30 in tips. No one knew this, but the violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the best musicians in the world. In that subway, Joshua played one of the most intricate pieces ever written with a violin, worth $3.5 million. 2 days before he played in the subway, Joshua Bell sold out a Boston theater, and the seats averaged about $100. The experiment proved that the extraordinary in an ordinary environment does not shine and is often overlooked and undervalued. There are brilliantly talented people everywhere who aren't receiving the recognition and reward they deserve. But once they arm themselves with the value and confidence and remove themselves from an environment that isn't serving them, they thrive and grow. Your gut is telling you something. Listen to it if it's telling you where you are isn't enough. Go where you are appreciated and valued. Know your worth and always keep God first. And so they got some pictures of, here he is in the subway, and, here he is playing in the subway, and here he is in the Boston concert hall or wherever he was. And so at first look of this, it sounds nice, but here's the thing. It sounds nice, but as with any good lie, it's interlaced with the truth, and that's why you miss it. And so here's what I want to start off by saying. Of course, it is important to know your value, to be confident, and to place yourself in an environment that's not toxic and that is positive and going to encourage you to grow. So let me just lay that foundation. However, there's something deeply narcissistic, there's something deeply problematic about this post because it feeds into the problem that I encounter most often with the people that I work with in my practice, and especially with new therapists who are trying to start their own practice. And here's why. When you look at this, it's fine. This is a great little story right here until you get to this piece. This one. The experiment proved, first of all, the experiment didn't prove anything. It was some very famous musician playing in the subway. But okay, he goes on to be exaggerated and say, the experiment proved that the extraordinary in an ordinary environment does not shine and is often overlooked. That's where we fall off the rails. Here's a nice little story, and then boom, bullshit. And here's why. The experiment didn't prove any of that. What the experiment proved is that if you don't understand your audience, if you don't understand the people in the community around you, then what you are doing is utterly useless and pointless. Here's what the experiment proved. The experiment proved that if you are a fantastic and amazing human being and musician, which I argue all of us are incredible human beings that have something valuable to offer, but if you take that valuable resource that you have and you place it in an area where you are not only not assisting those people you're trying to serve, but you're making it more difficult and taking away their potential from trying to do what they want to do, then nobody's going to value you. And so what's difficult about this is I think there are so many people who think like, oh, I have something so valuable to offer. I have something so important to tell the world. And then they go and try and tell it in a way that's very egotistical instead of trying to serve other human beings. What this proved is that if you take a $3.5 million violin and someone who's a world-renowned musician and you place them in an environment where people are just trying to get to work so they can make the subway on time, so they can get to work on time, so they can feed their family, nobody gives a fuck if it's a $3.5 million violin and if you're the most well-renowned concert violinist in the world. I have to get to work because my priorities are to take care of my family and to make it to my job so I don't get fired. No, I'm not going to stop and pay you $20 in the subway. You're not helping anybody there. Sure, maybe you're adding some ambiance, but let's think about it. Those people, I'm sure there's many who are trying to do some wonderful things in the subway and they're trying to make a living. I'm not trying to argue with those people. However, what I see most often when people start their business and when they fail is they forgot that the economy, that money is imaginary. The thing that is real is you providing value to other human beings. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care how smart you are or what your IQ is. I don't care how much money you have in the bank. Are you providing something valuable to other humans? That has to be the indicator. That has to be the goal and the objective. And this happens with therapists all the time. I get many interns in my office who start their private practice. They go through school. They've got tens of thousands of dollars in student debt, and they graduate and they think they're just going to open their practice and everyone's going to pay them money. No, you forgot the basic foundation of the economy. The whole point of this thing is you went to school to develop some skills, to hone some expertise in yourself, so then you can go back out into the world and serve other people with blood, sweat, and tears. That's the purpose. And so I'm not arguing that this gentleman, Joshua Bell, is not an amazing concert violinist. I'm not arguing that this is not the most incredible. $3.5 million for a violin. Holy shit. I'm not arguing that that's not an impressive violin. What I'm arguing that when we try and say that this experiment proves that the extraordinary is undervalued, that's bullshit. It's not about the extraordinary being undervalued. It's about you forcing the extraordinary upon somebody who doesn't want that in that moment. I think a better example would be if you are struggling. It's like King Midas, right? And that's a great story. For this example, if you are struggling just to feed yourself, if you just need food and a loaf of bread, and I, a hoity-toity philanthropist who thinks that I'm that shit, comes and hands you a bar of gold, thinking I'm doing you a favor, well, how egotistical and with such great lack of insight is that? You need bread. You don't need gold. You need food. Sure, you can take the gold and turn it into money and then buy bread, but in some ways you're making more work. You're not really thinking about what it must be like to be in that environment. And so is it a fun prank? Is it funny? Yes, absolutely. It's interesting to see someone who's world renowned and with a $3.5 million violin playing in the subway. It's great. But the problem that I see is people then take this and say, look, see, I'm being undervalued. That may be true. But I think to just say that as this blanket statement of, oh, I'm being undervalued, I need to be appreciated more, it is wholly inappropriate for this situation. You have to think about your audience. You have to think about bringing them value. And I think the real detriment of this and the real nefariousness of this lie is that this goes on to bolster people thinking that I deserve something. The world owes me something. The world doesn't owe you anything. It's hard work. It's dedication that gets you somewhere. And it's not just hard work and dedication that gets you there. There's also luck involved. There's also other people who help you get there. And most importantly, you have to use your brain and you have to be involved and connected with your community to think about how you're making the lives of other people better. People ask how I got started being a dream expert, how I got started with hypnotherapy, how I got started being a counselor. I just try and keep my goddamn eyes open and say, where are people suffering? How can I mitigate that suffering? If you are playing the violin in a subway, you are not mitigating people's suffering. In fact, you may be making it worse because you're making a very beautiful noise alongside the scraping and banging and clanging of the subway. I would imagine most people have their headphones in because those headphones are providing more value than the $3.5 million violin in the subway because they're blocking out the painful noise of the subway and the loud screeches and the horns and the people around them. So it just goes to show you that just because something is valuable here doesn't mean that it's valuable here. What's frustrating about this article is that there's an even greater lesson to be learned. It's to say, you may be undervaluing yourself right now because you think I'm not Joshua Bell. This goes to show you that Joshua Bell isn't anything. The only reason Joshua Bell is because he has cultivated an environment that helps people and brings them something valuable to their lives. It is very valuable to be able to set aside your stress of work and your job and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to put this to the side. I'm going to take a break from this, and I'm going to be enraptured by the music and the beauty of Joshua Bell and what he's doing here. That's valuable. It's a break from the world. It's a taste of something beautiful. It's a time to reflect on what it means to be human and what it means to make art. That's value. And it's valued at about $100 a seat, right? But you take that same thing and you put it in a place where it's not actually helping people and making their lives better. It's worth about $30 total. And so the message here is, I don't know who's sitting on the other end of this camera listening to this. I mean, I don't have a big channel over here on YouTube, but I hope that you would hear this message and think to yourself, wow, you're undervaluing yourself right now because you're comparing yourself to all these people who have taken a long time to develop something and are looking really hard at how to serve other human beings and make their lives better. It's not them per se. Every human being has equal value. Well, maybe not monetarily, but there's an intrinsic value of being human, and each one has an intrinsic value. That's why Joshua Bell or Kanye West or fucking, Kim Kardashian or Ryan Reynolds, whoever, they live by the same rules that we live by, or at least they're supposed to. We won't get into corruption in politics. But Ryan Reynolds can't just go and murder whoever he wants because he's Ryan Reynolds and makes millions and millions of dollars. He has to live by the same rules you have to live by. There's equal human value there. And that's the message that I think was missed here. I think that could be said of like, look, every human being has value if they take the time to think, how can I serve the world and make the world a better place for everybody else? That's what's beautiful here. And what this person is saying, what's this guy's name? Sean. I don't know. I'm sure this Sean guy is all well-intentioned. But whatever Sean was saying here today, I think he missed the potential here because he's adding to the self-entitlement that I see a lot of my therapists, not my therapist, but a lot of interns and a lot of other people online feel. They feel very entitled. They feel like they're owed something. Everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. I agree with that. But when it comes to success, that comes from a very astute and very hard-won and long-fought ability to find ways to make the world a better place. That's the point. I didn't go out and think what I wanted to be. I looked at myself and I said, hey, look, these are the skills and abilities I have. This is where I see the world hurting. I can help make that better. And so I dedicated my life to making that better. And I fuck up too. I have mistakes. I'm not the prime example of this, but I see stuff like this. And I have had to make a very deliberate effort in my life to not fall prey to these kind of thoughts and these kind of adulations about ourselves, like trying to make ourselves feel, oh, well, I'm just downtrodden by the world. Of course, there's repression. Of course, there's downtroddenness. But there's a bigger picture missed here. And I think that brings me to my last point. I'm already 13 minutes in. But it brings me to my last point of the difference between abuse and trauma versus entitlement. When we start to engage in this kind of thought and this kind of narrative where it's like, oh, I'm just not being valued, it takes away from the conversation of abuse and trauma because there's some real terrible situations where people are being abused and mistreated. And it's not just they're not being valued, they're being sucked dry. They're being mistreated. They're being abused by their environment. Just because Joshua Bell was not paid $1 million for his performance in the subway doesn't mean that he's being abused. It doesn't mean that he experienced trauma in that subway. There are people who are being abused and experience trauma. And by saying things like this of, oh, the world's not valuing me, it takes away from the real experience, I think, of people who are experiencing abuse and trauma. And those are different. The difference is, one is, I believe that I'm owed something. The other one is, people are taking away and devaluing my value as a human being. Just because someone doesn't pay you because you played a $3.5 million violin doesn't mean that you're being devalued as a human being. When you're sexually abused, physically abused, mistreated, financially abused, that's where you're being mistreated as a human being. And that's very different from this experience here. from the thing that's being said about Joshua Bell in this. And I'm sure Joshua Bell has nothing to do with this. I don't mean anything against him. I'm sure he was just having a fun little experiment to like play in the subway. I'm sure he probably enjoyed that time. And that's the thing. If he wants to play in the subway and that's for his enjoyment, he should. And I encourage that. I love the people who play in the subway. It's a great way to practice. But again, don't get it twisted. The value of playing in the subway is to see if people turn, to see what people's responses are. That's a you value thing. You're getting the opportunity to practice in front of a live audience, and you get to see if people smile as you walk by or they make this face. That is valuable feedback for you to improve on your skill as a musician. But don't get it twisted. You're not bringing value necessarily to those people. Now, I think some people will find value in that, and they'll pay $1 or $2. But the majority of people trying to get on the subway are just trying to feed their families and trying to make it to that meeting. They're stressed, they're busy, they're rushed. You're not providing value there. So don't get it twisted. It's not about being it's not about being hurt. It's not about being not appreciated. It's about asking yourself the question, am I bringing value to this situation, or am I asking for value from the people around me? That's huge. And if more people could ask themselves that questions and stop expecting people to just pay for them, give them things, do things for free, that would be really, really important. To think to yourself, am I bringing value? And in response, asking for the value back. I'm bringing value here, so I need to be compensated for that. That's economics. That's trade. That's what makes the world go round. I give you something that you need. You give me something that I need. That's good. If I'm giving you something that you don't need, that's entitlement. If I'm giving you something that you need but not getting what I need back, that's abuse. And I think the difference between those three things needs to be talked about and needs to be said. So, end of the rant here. This is bullshit on Facebook. It's just another reason why I don't get on Facebook anymore. If you have terrible stories on Facebook, please share them in the comments below. Hit the like button, smash subscribe if you want to hear more rants from a licensed trauma therapist about the bullshit that's online. I got you covered. Until next time, bye.